Today I'm joined by Craig Large, who is a UEFA A football coach badge holder. I welcome you to the show, Craig. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm not doing too badly. As we just spoke about, the weather has decided to do one, in your words, and hopefully it comes back in the next few days. You're a really interesting guy with loads of experience in the industry. But as we always start with these interviews, could you please start us off with where you first started off in football?
Being completely honest, it was one of those I got into football late. I didn't really play when I was sort of younger for a team. It liked it, but I'm a quiet sort of person, so I didn't really join a team. As I obviously got older, got interested in the obviously watching, and then progressed into coaching from there. I was at college because I could remember. I'm going to say remember things, remember teams, players, and such. One of the lecturers said I should give coaching a go, which I literally did. So I left college, as you do. It's like, what do I do next? Lots of letters to lots of local clubs, and Oldham Athletic were the only one to get back to us, and that started a journey with them.
We all know the grassroots game and how big it is, predominantly in England. Was that something that you ever got into?
Not really. Sort of as I've progressed in coaching and started doing my badges, I would work with lots of, I'm going to say, grassroots players and community projects, and working in schools. Lots of, I'm going to say, diverse experiences, which has been great because it doesn't matter who you're coaching; it's all the same. You're working with a person, and that's the one thing I can take from everything that I've done. Nothing changes. In that regard, you're always working just with a person.
A lot of people in football, if they coach later down the line, if they're a player, if they're eventually stopped, a lot of people go down that grassroots level. So you're one of the only people that I've spoken to that actually hasn't done that. So when you were younger then and you were growing up, I'm sure you were into football at that time. Did you want to be a coach if you looked into the future?
Probably without realising it. I think what I'm like as a person, I like helping people. That's one of the things that I've become more aware of. And looking back, it's always been, I've always been there to help people. So I think I ended up doing it through that. That was just been built into me. And as I say, the realisation that my body couldn't do what my mind wanted. So it was one of them. I was never going to reach any type of level.
Do you think it's easier then to get into the coaching world when you were younger or now? Because I often get reminded by family members and people that are into the game near me. They often tell me that it's harder to get into the game now because we see so many players that retire go into the coaching scene. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's equally as lucky to get through?
I think luck plays a lot. I think football, in most industries, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Listen, rightly or wrongly, I'm not here to criticise in one way, because that's benefited me at times as well. But I think in terms of being able to get into academies, I think it's easier just because an experience that a player can bring, or their experiences that they can bring, is something different to what someone like myself. Whereas if you haven't played, I think you really do have to be a student of the game. You really do have to really understand how to pass on those techniques, the skills, listen, how you interact, and obviously, is it actual real to the game? You know, you can do your session plans on paper and everything's perfect, but does it replicate what actually goes on within a game?
So then how did you adjust then? Because a lot of people that go into coaching have obviously played, and you were maybe one of those few that didn't do so. So how did you end up making the sessions enjoyable, number one? Because obviously a lot of sessions need to be enjoyable to get the best out of players, but also to get the same level of training into the players that you didn't have.
To be honest, I've been very lucky in terms of people call them mentors now, people I've been able to work with along the way. And I think it's knowing the right time just to shut up and listen. So more experienced people than me, it was just having a look and then just seeing what works and what doesn't. Because I think no matter who you watch, in coaching wise, you've got to make sure that it still sits within you and your values and how you see the game. You can't just go and replicate somebody else's work because they won't be aligned. It won't be in terms of how it comes across. You know, if you're, I always want to play play out from the back. If you try and replicate somebody who goes a little bit more direct, the players will feel it. They'll know that there's something missing.
I get that a lot, and I was going to ask you, and this is probably jumping ahead a lot in your career, whether it be you or it be Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola, but then we jump down the pyramid and we maybe go to a League One or a League Two club. What would be the difference in the training? Because obviously the managers want to get the best out of these players, regardless of their age. But what would be the main difference? Because ultimately they have to win, right? That is their job. They need to win. So what would you see if we went into a Premier League ground? What would be the difference between the two trainings?
I'm going back to when Ian Dowie was manager at Oldham. So I'm going back 20 odd years now. And he did an interview and he was asked a similar question. He was like, "Oh, what's the difference? You know, you've been in the Premiership. You've come to Oldham. What's the difference?" He was like, "At Oldham, you just needed to repeat the sessions more often. So whereas players higher up might need only 1, 2, 3 attempts to do it, you know, players lower down just might need more attempts. It might just need a different way to put the information across. It's not that one's more inferior than the other. It's just how you relate what you want to do to those players."
So when you got into coaching, what was that like? Do you remember the first kind of idea that you had? I mean, I'm guessing it wasn't full-time straight away. It would have been a local team or whatever it may have been. And you could tell us, I've got loads of information on you here and there's so much that you've gone through. I'm sure so many team talks and so much experiences. But when you first started off, were you quite inferior of what was ahead?
Oh, yeah. To be honest, I went in, as I say, Oldham got back to us. So I was invited into training. I think it was, if I remember right, it was a Thursday evening. And sort of just went down and there was hundreds of people there, and you just having a look. And I was a bit in awe to begin with. I would say also a little bit naive in terms of probably a little bit too. Oh, you know what I mean? All it is just going, you know, playing football sort of thing. And then obviously as you start to do more and more sessions, watch more and more coaches coach, you realise there's a lot more to it than just, you know, he passes it to him, so on and so forth.
So what did you learn? Do you remember that first idea? I mean, did you go in thinking that you knew it all? I mean, is that something crazy to say? I mean, a lot of coaches might go in there and think, I've been a player in the past. I know everything that there is. I've been coached by decent managers. What was your experience like, obviously not being that former player?
Oh, listen, I think definitely I went in sort of thinking I knew more than I did. And then that quickly sort of I quickly realised that wasn't the case. Also, I'm going to say, as I said before, I'm sort of a quieter person in terms of trying to put myself out into a group. So before I actually started doing my coaching badges, because I started volunteering at Oldham before I got any coaching qualifications. It was just sort of come down, watch. I went back to the college that I've been at doing sort of would say night school, doing a coaching qualification there, just to try and get me used to, I'm going to say, delivering a session, because I'd gone from being at college, not working with anybody rather than sort of helping out in PE lessons, like when I did my work experience, to again just assisting on sessions, but it was very different. So it was just getting that confidence to be able to stand and deliver a message.
That is the most important thing, right? The communication. And I was reading up about you, and one of the most important things that you like is the transparency between yourself and the players. You like honesty. Is that something that you had to learn? I mean, if you were going in as that younger version of yourself, you wouldn't have been able to deliver the team talks. But then you later down the line, you've seen team talks are so necessary that they influence games too much to be able to not do them.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think being able to get the information across is absolutely massive. I was very, very lucky. The first person or the first coach I worked with, a guy called Frank, is, in terms of communication, was outstanding, or is outstanding, I should say. So in terms of being able to learn how to structure an actual team talk or deliver a point was perfect. And at times when you can ramble on and you try and cover every base possible, it's like, calm down. Just what's key? What are the 3 key points that you need to get across?
The best thing, or not the best thing, sorry, the start of what meant to be one of the best jobs in the world, I'm sure you could admit. You started off at Chaddington Town Reserves in 2006, and you stayed there for over 5 years, and that was a big step up for you. Now you're the reserve team manager, and this, I believe, is on a semi-professional basis. What was that step up like? Now you're the main man that players and the coaches around you have to go to ask for things and to rely on things.
It was massive, because at the time I'd passed my level 2. I'd got onto my UEFA B. Now for that I needed to work, because at the time I was only working with foundation phase players, so under 9s, under 10s, and to do the B license you needed to be working more 11s, 12s, 13s upwards. So I was lucky. One of the other coaches from Oldham at the time was assistant manager with the first team at Chaddington, and said, listen, come down. Again, sort of stars align, right place, right time. They were doing an extra long pre-season. So literally, I ended up getting 2 months worth of coaching with them. And yeah, in essence, just to help me do my B license. And I went from sort of helping out, just doing sessions with any group of player, because at the time, first team and reserves trained together to begin with, to getting the opportunity to lead the reserves.
You also had to scout opposition players and players that you wanted to bring into the reserve team. The one that sticks out to me is the scouting of opposition players. And I don't really think people understand how serious the football pyramid in England can be at times. I mean, this is quite something to be able to scout opposition players. How did you go about that?
I was going to say we probably started doing this before it was, I'm going to say, normal to do it. I was lucky there was a guy called Steve Patterson who worked with the first team at Chaddy. And he just said, listen, do you want to come with us? So we used to go. It was one of those, we'd both take either a player or the team. And it was just literally going, just writing notes. Like, what did we notice? Listen, players-wise, left-footed, right-footed, with the opposite side to whichever foot they were, were they quick, slow, what did they like to do? Team-wise, what type of, what the structures in terms of restarts or goal kicks, free kicks, and then just trying to pick up any type of bits of information and then passing that back on to whoever needed it.
That's quite serious, though. I mean, semi-professional wouldn't be a full-time job. You have to balance this around, I mean, for the other player or the other coach there as well. How did you find time to be able to do that? I mean, was this something that you did every single week?
Yeah, well, where possible. So it normally coincided when maybe a training session was out, because at that time I was coaching 4 nights a week. So again, because I say the assistant manager at Chaddy was also at Oldham. Oldham trained Tuesday and a Thursday. So Chaddington trained Monday and a Wednesday. So it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in terms of like team sessions. And then if needs be, it was going watching somebody. And then obviously games at weekend.
You can talk about this from today's perspective. I think that'd be a lot more knowledgeable for the people that are watching this show and people around the world. In England, the semi-professional system is huge. The national football pyramid, or whatever you want to call it, relies on semi-professional so much. And obviously that step up to go from semi-pro to professional must be a great feeling. But when you're the semi-professional club and you've got agents that I've spoken to on this show that are doing deals for players constantly because the window never closes, what is that like to be in that chaos? I mean, you're playing, is it twice a week with training in between as well as balancing full-time jobs? I think someone told me on here that when they were a former pro, they said that playing semi-professional football is harder than being a professional. Do you agree with that? And what is it like to be inside that semi-professional environment?
Oh, I think most definitely. I don't think people fully understand sort of like the time constraints, everything that goes on. for example, depending on obviously how high you are within the pyramid, and you're part time, you could have an away game on a Tuesday night, which means you've got to leave at 1 o'clock to get there. So that's, having an understanding boss, taking holidays. So you end up going to the game, and then obviously you've got to get back. So you're getting back in the early hours to then have to go into work again. So I think what semi-professional players actually do maybe isn't sort of understood or appreciated enough. What they give to the teams that they're playing for.
And the teams that they play for is a really interesting one again, because the finances down there aren't obviously the best, hence why they're semi-pro. So a lot of players stay there for a year or two and then they decide to move on. Is that something that's always been the same inside the semi-professional scale?
Yes, definitely. So when I was at Chadderton, when I first started there, the players got paid. Now, some were on a contract, which meant they got a fixed fee all the time. Others just got, I'm going to say bare money, bare tokens. So it was only a little bit, but then they reverted to not paying players. So you had players who would just come in because, listen, they love the place, and using it as an opportunity is like a little bit of a step up. And that's always an issue that you're going to have. It's a little bit of a standing joke that, players sometimes move for an extra tenner, but that's what it like sometimes can be if you're not getting paid and you do well for your club, and then somebody comes in and says, listen, we'll pay you, argument's sake, sort of like 50, 70, £100 a week, like a game, then it's not always easy to say no.
Because a lot of the players do that for their love for the game, but also it's quite a bonus that they have the money aspect on the side. But the players that are playing in the semi-pro game at the age of 27, 28 know they're not good enough to be able to go to the National League and be a full-time footballer.
I think sometimes it's a difficult one, because like anything, like we've said before in terms of the coaching, it's also opportunity. It could be sometimes it's just circumstances why they're playing a little bit lower, but obviously as you're getting older in years, it's more unlikely that you'll move 4 or 5 divisions up the pyramid, shall we say.
A lot of players, though, in this division, and we'll talk about your career and other things later on, but this is really interesting for me. There's not a lot of, there's hardly any money being spent on players in the semi-pro and in these divisions. And I was once told, and you can tell me this is true or false, that apparently on the Saturday morning of the game, if you're registered before 11 a.m, you can play. I mean, is that because of players could drop out for work issues, they're injured? I mean, that's quite something to be able to be called up on that week at 10:30 a.m. and then be in the squad later on in the afternoon.
Oh yeah, I think definitely. I think I say leagues understand the constraints that clubs are under, and obviously because work has to come first. It is one of those where everyone loves to play football, but your part time can't be dictating always to your full time work. So so I think there is a little bit of there is an understanding by the leagues to try and help everybody, but obviously that can cause its own issues when a player rings the manager up at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning and says not available today.
The next 5 years that you spent at Chaddington, what did that end as? I mean, did you continue to stay as a reserve team manager? I mean, how did you improve personally?
I did. I stayed at Chaddy for that time. I then got offered an opportunity to help out the Northwest Cerebral Palsy team. So there was a little bit of a clash on Saturdays where, excuse me, we couldn't. I couldn't always be there, and the manager at Chadderton at the time obviously wanted that type of commitment, and it just wasn't. I just wasn't able to do it, so I sort of went to do. I ended up doing it just for the year, but a year with sort of the Northwest CP team under 16s. And
you only stayed there for a few months, right?
Yeah. It was just the one season. It was at that point. well, funny thing was I went back to Chadderton. So within this the time that I was with the CP team, I got asked to go and help out with a team called Woodley Sports, taking their reserve team. So ended up sort of doing that team for the year. At the end of the end of that season, there was a few changes within the CP structure. So it was sort of a step away. I thought I'm stepping away from there. Also, Woodley changed their model, so they actually tried to go full time. They were bought by an Australian businessman who had a private academy, so he ended up using his players within that. So there wasn't a role for me. Luckily for me at the time, sort of the role back at Chadderton doing the reserves sort of came back up, and I was asked to return.
This is something so new that we now see so much diversity into football. Cerebral palsy, I've spoken to amputee players. I've spoken to so many people that have disabilities and they make the most out of their disabilities. And I think that's such an amazing thing. But could you just elaborate on the cerebral palsy game? And is that different to obviously the 11-a-side football that we're so used to seeing?
Oh, yeah. It is. It's, for the ages we did, it was 7v7. So a lot smaller. Now, the under-16s, the game that when I was involved in it, is different to the men's. So they have different classifications depending on how the cerebral palsy is. And in the male game, that you've got to have certain classifications on the pitch at all times. Whereas in the under-16s, it was just you pick your team. So there wasn't, you could have anyone on any on the pitch at any one time. But it was a great thing and a great reminder that it's just people playing football. I remember speaking to one of the boys who, when he was playing for trying to play for his junior team, he stopped him playing. Now this kid could play. There was no doubts about it. And he actually went on and represented England in the CP for the first team. So there was no doubts about it. It was just obviously with having cerebral palsy, it just needed to be managed in terms of they call it load now, but how much he played, what he did. So it was just being aware of him. But that was always a thing. So we just adapted how we did the training just to suit the players that we had.
Do you think that the cerebral palsy teams, do you think that they could be, I don't know how to describe it. So I spoke to the England amputee coach and he told me that they're not associated with the FA, they're a charity, but they were at one point in about 2006, 2007, they were owned by the FA. Is that the same with cerebral palsy in other disability sports where they could be having more funding and more, because there's so many more players that have cerebral palsy that aren't having the facilities to be able to play?
I've got to be honest, at the time that I was involved, it was in association with the FA. So we were a regional hub where obviously for North West, and there was 7 or 8 different areas. So we used to come together sort of 2-3 times a year and play games, but it was under the guise of the FA. Now, I've lost track of what goes on, so I'm not sure whether they're still associated with the FA, so I can't say. But anything where the FA can help in terms of the funding and improving helping coaches with the qualifications and things like that will only benefit the sport. To be fair, England over the years has helped many, and I do realise I'm going to quickly jump in and go. There's not an unlimited pot of money that they can be spending on everything. Yeah. But again, in any way, I've known a few people who've been involved in the amputee side of it. And I think sometimes it's getting a bit more help and alignment, and it will help build the sport.
Well, it's good to see that tomorrow on TNT Sports, the Portsmouth amputee team will be playing Everton amputee team in the FA Cup final. So good luck to Thomas Atkinson, who has come on the show in the past. So You re-signed for Chattington Reserves in 2012, and again, semi-pro basis. Yeah. Your job title was to organise training, manage games, and develop players. Was it kind of the same job that you were doing before?
Yeah, listen, it was exactly the same. Sort of slightly different because the management staff for the first team, I'm going to say it changed. It was still people who were there the first time, but there was just a few changes. And again, it was just trying to take the group. I'm going to say try and get them ready to go and play in the first team and help them as much as you can.
What would you say is the idea of the reserves team at semi-pro level? Because Sammy Leonard, and I like to go in these shows to bounce back to former people, so it builds my idea of the game, but also other people's. And he's often saying on social media, don't be that player that's sitting on the bench, or don't be that player that's playing for the reserves team. Play first team football week in, week out, regardless of the level. If you need to take 2 steps down, do the 2 steps down, because it will really benefit your career. Is that something that you saw where the reserve players maybe weren't getting that idea into the first team because you were in charge of it? Your job was to develop these players.
Yeah, it was. I do agree. You've got to try and test yourself at the highest level that you can. What I would say is during my time at Chaddy, they were quite forward thinking because although I'm saying it was a reserve team, it was basically 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old boys. So it was a young team playing in a men's league, and they were getting a different type of development. Like for it, they were being exposed to playing against sort of against men, which helped them. And it was one of those sod's law. After I left, quite a few of them actually moved into the first team. But
so you got the credit for it.
Well, to be fair, listen, whatever happens, it's always the players. It's the coaches have the easy job of just going and putting sessions on, and that's not just trying to be humble and all that. It's one of those. I look back now and if only I knew now, then what I know now I knew then, it would have been so much better. Because listen, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but the idea is try and move them on. And listen, get them to play at the highest level possible. But what I would say is our reserves and our first team, there was only 1 league difference. There was only 1 league between us because the league they put the reserves in was quite a competitive league for that reason, because it was all about sort of developing the players.
You left Chattington for the second time in 2015, and you then continued to do a few more things in 2016. I mean, a bit of a crazy question. Do you remember what happened in that time between?
Well, to be fair, I left Chaddy because I was getting married. That was the reason. And I sort of laugh about this one because I always used to try and preach about sort of being there. You've got to turn up. You've got to put the effort in. And then it was one of those. It was either upset the missus and not be going to seeing venues and doing all that side of things. Or sort of go against what I believe. So I took the lesser of 2 evils and decided just to walk away and just keep the wife happy.
Well, I hope that went well in the end. So you, at this time though, you were still the Oldham Academy coach. Were you the face coach? What were you doing at that time from 2001 up until the present day of today?
So 2001 up until 2016. So yes, it was literally just before I got married. That was just as a part-time coach, working within the age groups. So it was predominantly working 9s and 10s. I then, I've got to say, had the opportunity, was asked to take the 11s, 12s, and then just progress through the different the different ages. To then, I say, 2016 becoming the foundation phase league coach. So that meant looking after 9s to 12s, but coaching with the under 9s, sort of our new intake of players each year.
I always ask the same question to people who coach with players under 18 who are understanding football better, and the younger the player, the more obvious maybe the question may be. When you as a coach is seeing those players come through the door, whatever level, what do you think is the idea? Do you want to turn them into your player? I mean, into the player that you would like them to be, or do you just want them to play football expressively? And what happens? What happens?
I'd like to say it's about them in terms of being what they are. So if they're a dribbler, be a dribbler. If there's someone who wants to get out and play, then play. Listen, if you're a defender and you like to tackle, then listen, that's fine. We had a player. I think we signed him under 12s. Now he loved to defend, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with that one because that was his. We just tried to help him in all the other areas of his game. You don't want to coach any of it out of anybody. I had a little bit of an epiphany moment. Taking under nines. I was on the Advanced Youth Award, which is more I'm going to say the soft skills. Someone explained it to us within coaching, specifically aimed at the foundation phase. And driving to St George's Park on one of the meetups, listening to a podcast, and it was about when Messi was at Barcelona and he'd first gone, and how everyone obviously goes on about the rondos and this, that, and the other. And the person speaking was saying how Barcelona changed their outlook for him, so he was allowed to dribble within these sessions. And we had a player at the time within our group, and that was his. That dribbling was his thing. It was his sort of key characteristic. But after listening to that, it was one of those where I caught myself saying, pass it. And it was one of those where I give myself a little bit of a talking to, as sad as this is going to sound, but I was going against what I believed just because I fell into a trap. So it was just a nice reminder to each player that we have, especially in the younger age groups, is an individual. You know, no one remembers when they get the contracts at 16 or sign a professional contract at 18, how many games they won under nines. You know, it's about what they try, what they learn, you know, what mistakes they make. That's what's going to help them on the journey in the long run.
A huge criticism of European football, but I'd like to say English football as a whole is exactly what happens, where coaches would rather see players play more disciplined, less expressive. And in the grassroots level, it's been criticised hugely by myself and through other people, where, you know, you'll be in a team and the coach, as you've just mentioned, there'll be one player who is really good at dribbling, and that's what they do best. And their best attribute would be to dribble past three people, pass the ball for a goal. But for some reason, I don't really get why, and especially in grassroots where the coaches is nowhere near as good as National League or whatever, it's someone's dad, usually. I don't get why they try and squeeze that expressive side out of players so young. I mean, do you understand why they do that? Could you tell us why?
I think it's a difficult one, and I also wouldn't want to answer and sort of someone take my answer the wrong way. But you only know what you know. You asked me the question before about when I first went into Oldham, what was it like? I knew what I knew, but thought that was everything. And it's only as you start learning more that you realise you know nothing. And you're always at, like, I'm going to say, the bottom rung, because there's always something else to go and learn and pick up. And as I say, I've been very fortunate in the people who I've worked with who I'm going to say I've learnt off, or who ideas I've aligned myself with. And I think sometimes that's the issue. It's how things are perceived. There are some fantastic people out there who listen. Everything's about like developing the kids. Listen, letting everyone have equal playing time. Grassroots is about kids playing. It's not about sort of just, you know, going smashing a team 15-1, but one player only gets 5 minutes. You know, it should always be about everybody playing, because you just don't know what might happen. And one of the things I say quite a lot is, you know, players, people, kids should still want to play football, be around football when they're 70, 80, 90. We shouldn't be the people or somebody shouldn't be the reason why we put the fire out, where it's like, oh, I'm staying away from that. We need to be sort of adding fuel to the fire. You know, what can they try? You know, that's the that's my little outlook on it. It's about, listen, how can we develop people?
There was a footballer at a Premier League academy a few years ago, and he was part of a documentary, and I believe he was Crystal Palace's player, and he was part of a documentary where he came out and said he's got the defending of Van Dijk, he's got the speed of Mbappe, he's got the dribbling of Messi, he's got this of this of this, and it was mind-blowing at the age of, I think it was genuinely under 14s or under 15s, for someone to have such a big, I wouldn't say ego, because I like the self-belief, but let's be serious, you're nowhere near to that standard. And how do you get those players on that level where they think, I'm the best, I shouldn't be here, I should be at a better club? As a coach, how would you change their mindset? And would you do it through drills or just a talking to with the parents?
I think this one, it depends on it does depend on I'm going to say the personality of the player, but also what type of relationship you've got with player and parent. If, as a coach, you've developed it where you can have I'm going to say, an honest conversation, then that's great, because you can always listen. You're not as quick as that, or your defending isn't as good as that one. It could also be where how you set up your practice, that would maybe get the player to realise that they're not completely where they're at, but I think it's also getting them to understand that that's okay, because if someone at that age is at those levels, then where'd you go? How do you improve? Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes there is a lot of, I'm going to say, bravado that's put on outwardly, because people want to look like they're achieving and being the best. But I think sometimes realizing what you still need to become better at is just as important. But I think it also all that depends on the types of relationships that are created. Again, with that honesty, because working within an academy, you have to give players feedback. Now, the easy option is to always tell them what they're doing well, whereas being a little bit more honest. And listen, I'm not saying hammer the kid in any way, shape, or form here, but being a little bit more honest in the feedback, and it's might get them to have a more rounded view of where they're actually at. And as I say, you always want them striving. They need to love the journey. So it's one of those. Well, do you know what? You don't think I'm a Van Dijk style defender. Well, do you know what? I'm going to go and prove you wrong.
But then you look at the other side of the scale, and you see players that we could be talking grassroots, or we could be talking academies, where I think the word would be they're not motivated enough to be wanting to play at their best level. I think you see a lot of players in grassroots level who are playing football week in, week out because their parents want them to do some sort of exercise. How do you make that session more interesting for those kind of players who obviously won't be as good as the players at the top who are the big egos, I'm the best one here? How do you make it a balance for everyone?
That just comes down to, like when I say, the pre-planning, which isn't always difficult depending on the time constraints that the people are under. But know what that player needs to get out of the session. As you say, you might have a player who needs testing in other ways, but if you've got sort of somebody who's turning up who's literally just there, as you say, because they want to go and have a run around, then set it up so that they get to have the run around. And you might just drip feed bits of information into them. They don't want to have 4 or 5 coaching points within that session. Give them what they want, because once they start feeling a little bit more comfortable, that might change.
I get that a lot. And I think with the pressure that is put onto these children out of grassroots level now into academies of clubs, etc., every child, near enough, would like to be a professional footballer. Of course they would. It's the dream. But then we see, and I talk to so many people on here, that they say it's not quite the dream unless you're the Bellinghams and the Harry Kanes. And even that comes with a lot of the negatives of the things that we don't quite see. But if you're at the lower side of the professional game, there's a lot of sacrificing and you're getting paid a 9-to-5 job. It's not as much money as people seem to think. But do you think from a very young age, if I was into an academy at I think it may have been Phil Foden at Manchester City's academy since the age of 4. So that was a kind of a luck thing for Manchester City. He's all right. At the age of 4, you're nowhere near what you could possibly be. But is there so much pressure? I mean, Do you criticise the English footballing system in that way, where there's so much pressure put onto these children?
It's a massively difficult one. I think if clubs are really, really honest, they won't have them in as young as they do. They'd rather have them a bit like it used to be and have them later, but they have to get them that young. Have to is a strong thing, but someone else will always take them. Someone else is always willing to go, we'll go for an under threes. We'll get them in doing an under two session. Do you know what I mean? We'll put something on where they get an affinity for the club. That is the biggest problem. But again, it's then how it's packaged. I remember the first, I'm going to say, parents' evening that I was in and around at Oldham, and the dad said it in jest. So this is under 11s. So before the boy went in to have his review at Christmas, he was like, "Don't sign anything before I've had a chance to read it." And it's like, listen, he's under 11. He's just going to get offered like to continue. Now, it was obviously in jest, but they're the types of jokes that obviously kids pick up on, and they might think people are being serious. So I think it's again the environment that's built around. Children are now becoming more and more professional, younger and younger, just because they see it as a career rather than going playing football with your mates.
You were then, in the year 2016 to 2017, a community coach. What does that entail? Again, that couldn't have been professional, right? That wouldn't have been a full-time job that you carried out every day.
No. So at the time, I was foundation phase lead with Oldham, but because of the way the hours were structured, I didn't have to be in all the time. So they worked with Oldham Athletics Community Trust. So I used to just go in, and it was a way to also scout players. You're having a look. So it was going in. So during the school term, I'd go in taking, I would say, lunchtime clubs, and some lessons, some P lessons. I'd do after school clubs, help out with any tournaments that were being run, that the schools went into. And then obviously during the holidays, it was the holiday clubs, which was obviously getting there to register in the morning, to then do different activities throughout the day.
And then what happened? Because you left the community coach role, and then, as far as my research goes, there was a bit of a blur in this time period where, up until this point, I mean, you were at Oldham, but what else were you doing?
Oh, well, I left. It was one of those. I got to the point where I was doing the Advanced Youth Award. It was taking up a lot of the time, and if I was going to do it properly, and spend enough time actually looking into things, I needed to free up a little bit of time. So I stepped away from doing the community trust and just focused on being the foundation lead at Oldham. And then in the September, there was a few changes. Further up, we got a new an interim academy manager, which freed up a spot or the position of youth development phase lead, which is a role that I was offered. So I took that, and that was, I'm going to say, properly full time, because you was, I'm going to say, in and around sort of like the youth team during the day, sort of just listen, bibs and coals, go collect some footballs. It was one of those just helping out in that regards. And then in the evening, so I was coaching under 15s or 16s. So took one of those groups, but then overseeing the 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s. So that was in September. Fast forward to the 27th of December, and Oldham decided to sack the manager. The interim academy manager was put into in charge of the first team. The head of coaching went as his assistant, and I was asked to lead the youth team. So the day after, we played Blackburn away from home, and it didn't go great. It's the easiest way to put it. I was being really honest. I was stood on the sideline going, I'm not ready for this. Had a right sort of little moment. Got in touch with. It's changed its name. It's called the League Coaches Association now, but at the time it was BFCA, and just asked for a mentor. They put someone in touch with us who was just able to sort of speak with. But yeah, so from sort of then in December up until February, I led the youth team until sort of Pete came back, and then a month later we went permanently with the first team.
So that step up that you had at the time when you got offered that role, did you think you were ready for it, or did you say that this would have only been for a set duration of time?
I didn't at the time. I didn't think whether I was or I wasn't. It was just like it was a little bit of a whirlwind because we was on the training pitch. So we had the youth team, we had the under-16s in, doing a session. Pete gets a phone call. Listen, come and have a word with the chairman. He goes off. We finish the session, go back to the club, and then it was he came upstairs and went, "I'm in charge of the first team," sort of thing. So it was making sure, obviously, that was what was needed for them because obviously he had to get himself ready for training the day after. And it was just making sure we had everything prepared, ready for the game. So I didn't really think, to be completely honest. But it was probably the best thing for us because there was no time to think in terms of doing it and going on from there. I got exposed to something that I'd never done before. Obviously, it was coaching every day because I was coaching the 18s and taking the 16s in the evening. So in terms of being exposed to opportunities, it was great because it was 2 games and something like 6 or 8 sessions a week. So I was able to try, make errors, and learn.
What is Oldham like as a football club? Because you've been there for loads and loads and loads of years, and it's a really historic English football club. And yeah, tell us what it was like inside and out. I mean, I believe it may be them. Have they been hit with financial troubles in the last few years?
Like previously. So when to be honest, I'd started in the sort of like October, and then by the end of that season, they had been taken over, but the guy who was running the team had run up the wage bill and then just pulled his money, which created its own financial problems at that time. It was then taken over by a consortium of businessmen who kept it running for a long time. Ended up with just one of them staying and taking it on himself. It was then sold to an agent whose primary job was an agent, and it didn't go so well, shall we say. We ended up with a couple of relegations, which is why the team's in the National League. And for the last, to be fair, it's now coming up to 2 years, we were bought by a local family, the Rothwells. So it's changing. What I'd say is it's always been interesting to work there. You have to be adaptable. You need to be ready for anything that might happen. But yeah, it was one of those. It was, in terms of an environment to learn, it was probably one of the best places you could, because anything and everything happened. So if you can work at Oldham, you can work anywhere. I'm also being like slightly. I don't want to sort of like sound like I'm going to hammer the place, considering today is the day when I've said that I'm leaving, or I'm going to be leaving. So yeah, listen, it was one of those for. It's not been the ending I would have liked, but it is what it is. But I think, listen, overall, if I hadn't have been there, I wouldn't be here now. So listen, you take the rough with the smooth, and the journey takes you where it takes you.
And where do you see where do you see Oldham heading back in the next few years? Because I've always been told that you never do business with friends or family because it never ends well. When you've been inside the club, what have you seen? Has there been a positive or negative impact about the family taking over a football club?
I think in terms of it's got the fans back. The previous owners, I think it's well documented that they didn't get on, and that reduced attendances. So as soon as it was bought by like the current owners, you can just see by the average attendance. I think we was up to sort of like high 60s, 7,000s last season. Absolutely unheard of. The fans are absolutely tremendous. The noise that they make, I've got to say, especially away games. We talk about players who put shifts in when we were talking about non-league before. Like the fans are, I'm going to say, ridiculous. Plymouth on a Tuesday night, not a problem. They go, they sell it out. Do you know what I mean? They sing the home fans, and they come back and they, you know what I mean? They crack on. They're absolutely fantastic.
Where do you see the club heading in the next few years?
Listen, hopefully, back into the Football League. Just for the fans, because they've put up with I'm going to say, a hell of a lot. So, for them, I hope they get back in. There are some really good people, still at the club. And listen, for people like that, you want them to do well. You know, I've had a long association with them, and that'll never end. I think I still slip and go we when I start to talk about the club and everything. So it's and it's good. And some of the people I've worked with are in the first team. It's, you know, I've been very, very lucky in that respect. But yeah, no, listen. Hopefully next season, but. Within the
No. It's Barnet season next season.
They can do the playoffs. That's not an issue. Yeah, listen. Hopefully, in the next 2-3 years, then they'll be back in the Football League.
When I saw Barnet last season, I actually went to Barnet Southend, and their fans, I'm sure you would know, their fans are insane. I've never seen fans dressing up as shrimps in my life before, and. Would you then say that the fans lower down the Football League, National League, and the National League North and South, would you say that they're more passionate to be able to follow a team so often? There's so much uncertainty than there isn't in the Premier League.
I'm not sure you could probably say more passionate, but I think they display it more or get the opportunities to, I'm going to say, display it more. For it, just thinking of the National League, with the way the makeup of the sort of the league is, the amount of away trips for the northern teams, it's absolutely ridiculous. But they still make the journeys. You know, there might be low numbers of away fans who turn up, to come up. I'm going to say come up north, but you know, it might only be 75. But that's the hardcore. They're the ones who show that type of passion, and they rock up on a horrible night at Boundary Park to go and support the teams.
I think I still stand by it. I do think the National League and Championship, anything but the Premier League, I think is a great experience. You get to learn about the players more. I've spoken to Barnet players. You know, I understand. I'm not saying I'm better than any other fan, but I'm saying that I get the club more than what you would get in the Premier League. And this is what you get with clubs like Oldham, Barnet, etc. And I really, really like that about the English footballing pyramid. However, to be that coach inside of a football club, you need to get your coaching badges. And something that they do today, and I'm not sure if it's the same as to when you were getting your badges in 2020, is it harder or easier? Because you mentioned that you needed to be working at a high enough level to be able to get the badge. I don't think that's something you've got to do now. I think if you have the money, you can do it.
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's probably more difficult now to actually get on courses just because of supply and demand. The amount of people who want to get on courses, there just isn't enough spaces. Is that, and what you've got to do to get on them, in terms of offering it or putting up a CV, how much CPD, or saying how many CPD hours that you've done. Again, what levels, what's changed since my time, sort of getting my UEFA B. The UEFA B, you had to be working within the professional game. So you had to be working at an academy, whereas that switched a little bit. Now you need to be working within grassroots. So we've had some coaches with us, or we had a coach at the time who was trying to get on it and was being refused because he worked in an academy. So it was strange. I think difficulties always are, but again, I'm going to say it's more because of just supply and demand. There are that many people, and again, it is luck of the draw. People will say different, but I definitely think it is in terms of having your application seen at the right time.
Because obviously you've experienced these courses, apart from the top one, which is the pro license, and you could tell us if you want to get that one, because I think if you get that one, you've succeeded in football in some sort of way. What would you say then about these courses? Because famously, Dorking manager, is it Mark White? I think it is. He's often come out and said that it's a load of rubbish. It's like walking across the street. They shouldn't be able to have the restrictions to be able to, if you don't have this badge, you can't coach at this club. Do you agree? Are these badges as simple as he makes out?
They're not as simple, but I can understand where he's coming from, because I think it's also how you title yourself. So if you're a manager and you're not doing any coaching, do you need a coaching badge as such? So if you're just standing there talking, being the motivator, and you're not really talking tactics, do you really need to? Whereas if you're a coach, yes, the coaching badges, I'm going to quickly jump in on myself there and go, just because you've got a coaching badge doesn't mean you're better than anybody else, because I'm going to say I have the privilege to work with people who, as coaches, were top draw, didn't have a coaching badge. But I've worked with others who, do you know what, weren't as good. Listen, I might be not as good as them as well. That is the thing. Sort of, ultimately, whenever you get a coaching qualification, it's a piece of paper. You only show whether you're capable as when you go and do a session. That's the be all and end all. Players are either going to have you or they're not, whether that's an under 4 or whether that is a senior pro. There is no doubts. So there is. Now, in terms of increasing your knowledge, increasing your understanding of the game, I think qualifications, yes, is the way forward. From it, also, most people say this one. Sometimes it's not the actual content on the course; it's the discussions in the bar afterwards. Do you know what I mean? When you just literally just chewing the fat on, listen, what about this? What about that? What are your thoughts? There's I'm going to say the real learning. And I think if you switch yourself off from, oh, well, you don't really need that one, it's just this, that, and the other, then you're only harming yourself. I've done a degree, or just finishing up this moment in time. And in terms of like my learning and what it's opened my eyes to, absolutely massive. Now, I am not an academic in any way, shape or form. And it's been that side of it's been a struggle. But in terms of actually listening and learning, it's been one of the best things that I've done. It's a sport coaching course, so it's linked to everything. But in terms of what I'm going to be able to take from that and how it's going to link to the teams I work with, it's there. But obviously then it also depends on how much I want to actually get that knowledge, learn that knowledge.
Well, the be-all and end-all is obviously, as you said, to do the training sessions, the routines. When you're the manager, and I've always wondered when it be Arne Slot at Liverpool or whether it be Dean Brennan at Barnet, how do they work their training schedule? Do they sit down at the start of the week and say, I want players in at 10 o'clock on Thursday and I want them at 1 p.m. on a Friday? How does it work? And their gym time, the lunch time, everything that they need to do, nutrition, everything is gone through the manager. So do they sit down at the start of the week, the year, the season?
Everybody's different. What I would say is I think if it was me, I'd be starting off and having a skeleton thing going back off this course, a nested plan. So this is what the year is going to look like. Then obviously fixtures come out. So then you're going, well, actually, I want a day off here, but we've got a game. So we're going to have to adapt how we're going to do it. So that's why I'm saying a skeleton. So you have the idea, but for me, you're always planning at least a month or two ahead, with obviously the little caveat of something pops up and you have to adapt. Because I think for players, there's nothing more important than being organised. If you're trying to give a good impression, if you're trying to let them know, listen, I'm going to say you're in charge, but that you know what you're doing. Listen, you need to follow me. The message I tell you are the ones. Then having the basic idea of what a week looks like, when they're going to be in, what they're going to be doing, it's an easy win. That is a thing. And if you're going to fall down on that, what about the other things that you're going to fall down on?
But that is obviously everything that comes into play when you're a manager or a coach, the head coach. But would you say it is the best job in the world?
For me, yeah. That is the being able to work with a team. It's just, I'm going to say it's something else. And I think this is why I gravitated more to coaching and playing, taking out lack of ability. Because just being in there and trying to get your ideas and working with people, it's just very, it's just be able to test yourself. I always say you take yourself out of reality for 90 minutes, 2 hours, however long the training session is, like whatever real world problems are going on, you're out of that one because you're just in the world of football. You're just in that moment. And I think that's the one, being able to work with them and I'm going to say build those relationships with players and be able to try and impart some type of knowledge into them and find the way that works best for them, because it's not a one size fits all. You've got to find out what works for each individual.
This question kind of intertwines with the last one that I wanted to ask you. Will you try and get your UEFA Pro? I mean, we all know how expensive it is, and when you're at that level, clubs do usually pay for it. But would you get it?
Oh, listen, most definitely. I have tried once, but unfortunately at the time, I didn't fit the criteria. You could apply for it if it was a head of coaching, but you needed to be at a higher category club. So it was a polite no, thank you, for it. But listen, again, that's what it is. But yes, is the short answer. I'd love to get on the course.
Well, I mean, your coaching career came to an end at Oldham, and you mentioned on Twitter that it's not how you wanted it to go, but that is part of football. And you've spoken in here that as you said, it's not the way that you wanted it to end. I mean, it's obviously personal, so we're not going to elaborate on what happened behind the scenes, etc., just for your benefit.
No, I can do. I will do that one. So, because Oldham were in the National League, being in an academy, you've only got 2 years to get back into the Football League before you lose the funding. So, because Oldham have been there 2 years, the funding's gone. So, all the roles within the academy have gone. So, it's not listen, I throw my toys out of pram, or the club have sacked me or anything like that. When it was just, there was no job there.
So,
well, it was.
So this summer, I guess you're going to be going job hunting, right? To go and find the next job. I mean, you mentioned that when you got given that role as the interim coach, that you didn't really enjoy it and you weren't ready for it. Are you ready for a first team role now? I think
I'd like to, yes, definitely experience it, being given the opportunities. I think with some of the learnings that I've done, since then, what I've tried to take in, I think most definitely. Whether someone's ready, you'll never know until you're given the opportunity. So there is that. But I think in terms of qualifications that I've done, in terms of coaching, in terms of this degree, I think it's provided me with a good base. I've also got a good support network around me in terms of people who have been first team managers, head coaches, so able to sort of get their knowledge, get their experience, ask questions. Also, I've been fortunate enough that they've allowed me to go and see sort of how they do things. I was at a CPD on Wednesday night, which was conducted by Dave Challoner from Stockport and his staff. So that was a great insight in terms of what they do. But it's like anything. I've got loads of documents. I've got loads of this. And on paper, I'm going to say it's brilliant. everything's right. But the key thing is, will it be like that in the real world? I have confidence in myself, but obviously it's just getting the opportunity to see whether that's right or not.
And lastly, taking everything into account, your UEFA A, your experiences in the past, and obviously the limit as to where the UEFA A will take you, where realistically would you see yourself come September had you found that job?
Oh, really interesting question. If I'm honest, probably abroad, just with how, if I'm going to be a head coach or work within a first team structure, I should say, I think it'll be more likely be abroad, only because teams are already set up. I'm not one of these people that want people to get sacked. So hopefully by the beginning of September, people haven't started losing their jobs for that to sort of like happen. So there'll be no opportunities. But listen, I'm open to any type of opportunity that might come up. I wouldn't turn my nose up at anything. It'd be listening to people speak, having a real conversation, just see whether our two approaches align and just sort of go from there. But no, exciting times.
Well, I like the sound of that. Maybe in Spain, you could be in hot, sunny Spain rather than gloomy old England, doing the best job in the world.
Yes, listen, I'm all over that. I'll take that.
Craig, it's been an absolute pleasure for the last hour talking about your career, coaching badges, semi-professional game, and so much more. I really thank you for joining me for this last hour. It's been brilliant.
No, Jamie, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.